The flight from San Francisco to Tokyo was supposed to be routine, a smooth 14-hour journey across the Pacific, carrying 236 passengers. The sun was just beginning to sink behind the horizon as the Boeing 777 lifted gracefully into the air, its engines humming with the steady confidence of modern aviation. Inside, passengers settled in, families arranging their children's headphones, businessmen flipping open laptops, and weary travelers slipping masks over their eyes. At the controls sat Captain Elena Ward, her uniform crisp, her posture calm, her eyes hidden behind aviator-style reading glasses as she scanned her instruments. To the crew, she was professional and precise, a pilot known for keeping her distance and her emotions locked away. There was a quiet authority in her voice whenever she spoke, a command that left no room for doubt. But few on board knew much about her beyond what her airline biography said: a decade of spotless commercial flight hours, a career defined by efficiency. The co-pilot, David Ross, glanced sideways at her. "Smooth takeoff, Captain," he said, adjusting his headset. Elena gave a brief nod, her gaze still fixed ahead. "Let's keep it that way." She rarely smiled in the cockpit, but her focus carried the weight of someone who had been tested before, tested far beyond ordinary skies. Hours into the flight, cruising high above the dark Pacific, turbulence rattled the cabin. The seatbelt sign chimed, and passengers gripped armrests nervously. Elena's voice came calmly over the intercom, reassuring, steady, as if she were guiding them through nothing more than a bump in the road. For most, her words were enough. For one passenger sitting in 14A, a retired Air Force engineer named Michael Grant, her voice triggered something deeper: familiarity. He frowned, tilting his head as if straining to recall a voice heard long ago over military comms. But the night was just beginning to unfold its secrets. At 32,000 feet, just south of Alaska, a sudden warning alarm pierced the cockpit. Elena's eyes darted to the instruments, a hydraulic failure warning. Systems began to blink red one after another, cascading like falling dominoes. The Boeing shuddered, dipping slightly before Elena corrected it with swift precision. "Hydraulic system B failure," Ross said, his voice tight with panic. Elena didn't flinch. Her hands moved quickly across the controls, isolating the system, rerouting commands, switching to manual backup. "Maintain altitude." In the cabin, oxygen masks hadn't deployed, but the subtle lurch had passengers whispering, eyes darting toward the flight attendants for reassurance. Elena's voice soon followed, calm as ever. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a minor technical issue. Everything is under control. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Her delivery was flawless, smooth, unshaken. But Ross knew better. This wasn't minor. Losing a hydraulic system in the middle of the Pacific was catastrophic enough. But the way she handled it, swift, surgical, wasn't something you learned in standard airline training. Hours dragged on. The Boeing limped across the dark expanse, guided by a pilot whose every movement seemed too sharp, too practiced, as if her muscle memory belonged to a different era of flying. And then, out of nowhere, the radar pinged. "Captain, we've got company," Ross said, eyes widening at the display. Two fast-moving contacts closed in from the east. Within minutes, the silhouettes of two F-22 Raptors appeared outside the cockpit windows, their sleek forms glinting under the moonlight. They flew in tight formation, escorting the crippled 777 like guardian wolves circling a wounded giant. Ross's jaw dropped. Why would Raptors be here? "We're not near restricted airspace." Elena's face was unreadable, her hands steady on the controls. But inside, a storm brewed. She recognized the maneuvers instantly, the way the lead pilot tilted his wing in a silent signal. It was the kind of greeting one only knew from a life she'd buried long ago. The radio crackled. A stern, clipped voice came through. "Commercial Flight 741, identify your captain." Ross froze, staring at the radio. "That's unusual." Elena hesitated for the briefest moment, her hand hovering over the comm switch. Then, with a steady voice, she replied, "This is Captain Elena Ward, Flight 741 San Francisco to Tokyo." There was silence. Then the F-22 pilot's voice came back, softer now, carrying a tone of disbelief. "Ma'am, is this call sign Viper?" Ross's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. "Viper? What the hell does he mean?" Elena didn't answer. Her jaw tightened. Outside, the Raptors held position, their navigation lights glowing like predatory eyes in the night. For the first time since the flight began, the passengers weren't the only ones with questions. The silence in the cockpit felt heavy, suffocating as the name lingered in the air. Call sign Viper. Ross's head turned slowly toward her, his face pale in the glow of the instrument panel. "Captain," he whispered. "What are they talking about?" "Viper, that's a military call sign." Elena's eyes stayed locked on the Raptors outside, her expression carved in stone. She hadn't heard that name in years. She had buried it under civilian uniforms, under regulations and flight schedules, under the facade of normal life. But now 30,000 feet above the Pacific, ghosts had come knocking at her cockpit window. The radio crackled again. 741 confirmed, this is Commander Elena Ward, United States Navy. Call sign Viper. Top Gun class of 2001. Ross's jaw dropped. His hands hovered over the controls as if grounding himself in reality. "Top Gun?" he breathed. You trained at Top Gun? You never said, "Because it doesn't matter," Elena said sharply, cutting him off. But her voice betrayed the tremor of memories rushing back, of carrier decks, dogfights, and a war she had sworn to leave behind. "Ma'am." The lead Raptor pilot's voice carried a weight now, almost reverent. "Command has been tracking unidentified aircraft in this corridor. We're here because intel suggested a possible intercept on a civilian jet. We didn't expect to find you at the controls." Ross blinked, panic and confusion rising. "Intercept? What intercept?" Before Elena could respond, a warning alarm shrieked across the cockpit. She snapped her gaze to the radar display. Another blip. Fast climbing, converging, unidentified. Her blood ran cold. "Contact bearing 210. The Raptor pilot barked over comms. "Commercial 741, maintain heading. We've got bogies incoming." Passengers in the cabin stirred as turbulence rolled through again. Some pressed their faces to the windows, spotting faint lights dancing far off in the dark. A mother in row 23 clutched her child tighter. Businessmen lowered their laptops, sensing a shift in atmosphere. Flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances, trying to keep smiles pasted on their faces while fear gnawed inside. Ross muttered, "This can't be happening. Hijackers, systems failing now. What are we even dealing with?" Elena's fingers moved over the controls with practiced speed, rerouting fuel lines, monitoring failing hydraulics. But her mind, sharper than any radar, already ran calculations. Civilian flight, compromised systems, unknown hostile inbound. If the bogey locked onto them, the Raptors would intercept, but if something slipped through, 236 innocent souls would be lost. Her voice hardened, the steel of a commander rising again. "Ross, stabilize altitude. Keep the bird steady no matter what." He nodded, almost in awe, as if seeing his captain for the first time. Outside, the Raptors broke formation, accelerating into the night like twin streaks of silver lightning. Elena watched them peel away, their afterburners blazing, her chest tightening. Memories flashed. She had flown like that once. She had been one of them. The cockpit door buzzed suddenly. The head flight attendant, a woman named Carla, stepped inside, her face pale. "Captain, passengers are panicking." "What should I tell them?" Elena's voice didn't waver. "Tell them the United States Air Force is giving us a courtesy escort. Keep everyone calm." Carla hesitated. "But that's an order," Elena snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. Carla's eyes widened, then she nodded quickly and slipped back into the cabin. Ross turned to her, whispering, "You've done this before. You're too calm." I said, "It doesn't matter," Elena muttered, but the truth was unraveling faster than she could control. The radar beeped again. The bogey was closer now. The Raptors' comms burst alive with chatter, sharp military code, their voices tense. Elena's hands gripped the yoke tighter, and she could almost feel the weight of her old helmet, the strain of G-forces pulling at her body. Then, without warning, the entire aircraft jolted. Passengers screamed. Overhead bins rattled. The right engine gauges spiked, then dipped, then stabilized again, but barely. Ross's voice cracked. "Engine fluctuation, possible fuel contamination, Captain, what do we—" Elena's eyes narrowed. "We fight." Outside, the Raptors engaged. Flashes lit the night sky in the distance, tracer rounds carving glowing arcs through darkness. The bogey wasn't alone, it had company. 3 unidentified aircraft swarmed, maneuvering in tight, aggressive patterns, circling like sharks. Ross's face went pale. Those aren't commercial. They're military grade. Who the hell are they? No answer came, just static and the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Passengers pressed against windows, gasping at flashes in the distance, the faint thunder of explosions rolling across the sky. Fear coursed through the cabin like electricity. Children cried. Some prayed. Others sat frozen, unable to process the unreal sight of a mid-air battle unfolding in front of their flight. Ross swallowed hard, whispering, "We're in the middle of a war zone." Elena's gaze locked forward, every nerve in her body alive. She wasn't just Captain Ward anymore. She wasn't a faceless pilot delivering people safely from one city to another. She was Viper again. The aviator who had once danced with death at Mach speeds, who had stared into missile locks and lived to tell the tale. The F-22 pilots' voices cut through the radio, desperate and strained. 741, hold steady, we're pushing them back, but if they break through, you'll have to... Static swallowed the rest. Ross turned, panic flooding his voice. If they break through what? What can we possibly do? We're a damn passenger plane. Elena's eyes burned with resolve. Her voice was calm, but it carried the edge of a blade. We'll do what we must. And in that instant, Ross realized the truth. This wasn't just a captain. This was a warrior. A woman who had once stood among the best in the world, whose name had echoed in briefing rooms and whose skill had been whispered with awe. The night sky outside erupted in fire. One hostel disintegrated in a plume of flame, debris scattering across the ocean below. The Raptors twisted, rolled, re-engaged, but the remaining aircraft pressed harder, diving toward the civilian jet like predators scenting blood. And for the first time in years, Viper knew this wasn't just another flight. This was destiny clawing its way back into her life. The Boeing trembled as if caught in the claws of the night itself. Red warning lights flickered across the instrument panel, hydraulic pressure sagging, the right engine sputtering like a dying heartbeat. In the distance, fireballs blossomed in the blackness where the Raptors clashed with unknown hostiles, their tracer rounds carving arcs of light across the sky. The radio howled with fragmented transmissions. Raptor 1, defensive roll, bogey on my 6, missile lock. Elena's knuckles whitened on the yoke. She had flown in skies like this before, where death screamed past in the shape of missiles, and the thin margin between survival and annihilation was measured in inches. But she had never done it with 236 souls strapped behind her, trusting her with their lives. Ross's voice cracked. "Captain, the hostiles are breaking through. They're headed straight for us." Outside the cockpit glass, 3 shadowed aircraft sliced through the dark, closing fast. They weren't commercial jets. They weren't escorts. They were predators, and their formation told her everything. Trained, disciplined, merciless. "Brace," she muttered. A hostile jet streaked by, its afterburner casting a brief orange glow across the fuselage. Passengers gasped, screams rippling down the aisles as windows filled with impossible sights. Some prayed, others clutched loved ones, all of them powerless against the chaos unraveling above the Pacific. Ross shouted, "We're a sitting target. We can." Elena cut him off, her voice sharp, steady, the voice of Viper. She reached down, disengaging autopilot completely. The Boeing lurched, responding directly to her hands, to her instincts. Ross stared at her in disbelief. Tell me you're not about to dogfight in a passenger plane." Her eyes locked forward. "I've flown worse odds." The hostiles dove again, weapons bay doors yawning open. In the same instant, Elena banked hard left. The entire cabin screamed as gravity tore at them. Oxygen masks swaying wildly, trays and cups shattering on the floor. The Boeing tilted in a maneuver no commercial jet was ever meant to attempt. But in Elena's hands, the lumbering beast rolled with predatory grace. A missile streaked past, missing by a breath, disappearing into the ocean below. The Raptors dove back into the fray, engines screaming. 741, evasive maneuvers are insane in that craft. "Hold steady, let us handle." But Elena ignored them. She knew the truth. With the Boeing crippled, they were too easy a target. If she held steady, it was a death sentence. If she fought back, if she flew this jet like the war machine she once commanded, it gave them a chance. Another hostile locked on, its targeting radar screaming across her instruments. Ross paled. "Captain, they've got us." Elena's breath steadied, every nerve focused. She yanked the yoke, rolling the Boeing into a brutal dive. Passengers wailed as gravity crushed them into seats, as overhead bins burst open and luggage cascaded, but the missile overshot, spiraling past into the clouds. Ross clung to the panel, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. You're insane. How did you even know?" "I didn't," she said, her jaw tight. "I trusted instinct." The Raptors re-engaged, their cannons blazing, ripping one hostile apart in a spray of fire. But two remained, relentless, circling back toward the crippled 777. Fuel pressure warnings screamed. Hydraulic fluid bled from the failing system. The Boeing's right wing trembled violently, groaning with each maneuver. Another second of strain and the whole aircraft might rip itself apart. The lead Raptor's voice broke through, ragged with shock. 741, Elena, Viper, you're flying that thing like it's an F-18. How the hell? Elena's reply was ice. Because it was my life. The Raptors pressed again, their tone shifting from disbelief to reverence. "Copy that, ma'am. Top Gun never dies." The last hostiles dove, desperate to finish the job. Elena gritted her teeth, dragging the Boeing into a climb so steep passengers screamed in agony, pressed back by crushing G-force. The cabin lights flickered, panels rattling, alarms shrieking. At the apex, she snapped the yoke forward, pitching the plane down in a gut-wrenching dive, dragging the enemy jets into overshoot. One Raptor pounced, shredding a hostile with a perfect burst. Fire streaked across the sky. The final hostile broke off, fleeing into the night, vanishing into radar shadow. The radio crackled. Threat eliminated. Sector clear. Only then did Elena exhale. Her hands trembled faintly on the yoke, but she forced the Boeing steady, guiding it back to level flight. The Raptors slid back into escort formation, their sleek silhouettes glinting in the moonlight. Ross sat frozen beside her, chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. Finally he spoke, voice hoarse. You just fought off advanced fighters in a passenger plane. Who are you?" She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead, steady as the horizon. "I was Viper," she said quietly. "United States Navy, Top Gun. I swore I'd never fly combat again." Ross whispered, "And now?" She paused, her hands easing the wounded jet back on course toward Tokyo. "Now I'm just a captain. And we've got 236 people to land safely." The Raptors' calm broke in again, their voices softer now, tinged with awe. "Ma'am, command will want to debrief you." The skies remember their legends, but Elena only shook her head. "The skies don't remember. They bury us. Now clear me a path. My passengers come first." The Raptors fell silent, then slid into formation tighter than before, a salute in motion. Hours later, the battered Boeing descended over Tokyo, its landing gear groaning, sparks flying as it touched down hard. Fire crews and military vehicles swarmed the runway, lights flashing against the night. Inside the cabin, passengers erupted in cheers and sobs, clapping as relief washed through them. But as emergency crews guided the aircraft to a stop, the Raptors soared overhead in a final pass, dipping their wings in tribute before vanishing into the stars. Ross sat back, still trembling. "You saved them all. 236 lives." Elena finally let herself breathe, leaning back in her seat. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark cockpit glass. Uniform neat, eyes weary, the ghost of Viper lingering in her gaze. She whispered, almost to herself, "No, they saved me." Outside, on the tarmac, news crews and officials waited, but Elena stayed in her cockpit, silent, her secret half revealed, half buried again. To the world, she was Captain Elena Ward, the woman who had saved a flight. But to those who had seen her tonight, the Raptors who flew at her side, she would forever be remembered as Viper, the Top Gun ace who refused to let death claim her passengers. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the cooling engines, the skies themselves seemed to echo with respect.